Welcome to season 11 of the Parenting Aces podcast, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, coming at you from California. It's a gorgeous day, but I have been relegated to the outer limits of my house to record today. So pardon the fuzzy video portion this week. And I hope that our next episode, I'll be back at my desk with my better equipment. But for now, I want to just let you know that we are discussing college recruiting in terms of camps and showcases. What's the difference? What should your child be doing? And when should they be doing it? We have with us Coach Ryan Carney, who is a current college tennis coach, but also runs Collegiate Exposure Camps, one of our partners here at Parenting Aces. And he is going to be talking about their upcoming camps at University of Pennsylvania this summer, and also talk a little bit about the camp that they held at the USTA National Campus back in December. So I hope that if you have a child who is a rising 8th through 12th grader, that you get some very useful information out of this episode that will help you make some good decisions in terms of what types of events and camps your child should be attending to maximize their recruiting experience. Before I bring Ryan on, I want to just remind you, if you're not already, we'd love for you to become a premium member of Parenting Aces. Just go to parentingaces.com, click on the join button, easy peasy. Also, reminder that we do offer one-on-one consultations. I would love to meet up with you via Zoom and help answer any questions or concerns that you have regarding your child's junior and college tennis journey. So you can access those through the shop tab on parentingaces.com, and we offer single consultations as well as packages at a discount. So for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode with Coach Ryan Carney. Well, hello, Ryan Carney. Nice to see you again so soon. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here. I think we're going to cover some good information today, and I'm glad to be able to share my knowledge.
Absolutely. Before we jump into our main topic of the day, which is what are showcases, what are exposure camps, what do kids need to be doing to be seen by college coaches, can you give our audience just kind of your brief background of how you got involved in tennis?
Sure. Yeah. My mom, she was a high school coach for about 30 years. And I'm from a small town, and there were a lot of good teams from that small town. So I'm proud of that, first of all. I played tennis in college at Westminster College in Missouri, which is a great spot. We're famous for Winston Churchill gave the Iron Curtain speech at Westminster. So I'm throwing in a plug there, I guess. But I enjoyed my time there. And then I became a college coach actually immediately after graduating from college at Missouri Valley. We started a new program, and I'm in my 19th year currently. So I've enjoyed being a college coach for all these years. I've been able to meet a lot of players, a lot of coaches, make a lot of friends, and we've really done very well. Our program, we're fighting it out a little bit this year, but overall we've done great, and it's been great to meet so many tennis players, coaches, and families, and it's a fun job.
So for those not familiar with Missouri Valley, tell us a little bit about your program. What division are y'all in? Which conference are y'all in? How's your funding situation, and how are y'all doing?
So we're an NAIA school in the Midwest, and depending on what part of the country you're in, that can be pretty common or not too common. On the East Coast, NAIA is not very common at all. In the South, Midwest, California, there are a lot of NAIA schools. So most of the schools that fall into that category would be schools on a little bit on the smaller side. Like we have about 1,400 students, but we do have some scholarship money for athletics, and we're by no means fully funded, and that would be pretty typical for NAIA schools. But we are able to kind of put together some good packages that make things affordable for people. And we have a lot of international players. People ask me sometimes, well, how do you have so many international players? We're in a small town in the middle of Missouri, and believe it or not everyone wants to be in a small town in the middle of Missouri. American players I'm always interested in, but sometimes that's a little bit of a deal breaker for them. But we've had some great teams, and the college has been very supportive. We just got 6 new courts that are just off campus, and we're enjoying that. So anyway, it's been great. And as we'll discuss, I also have worked with Collegiate Exposure Camps for a long time now. The first event I worked was in Canada, 10 or 11 years ago. And then we've progressed to having these camps at many, many great locations and UPenn coming up this summer. So I'm glad to be the director of that now, in addition to my coaching duties. And we have a lot of great coaches to work with.
Absolutely. And, I'm Recruitable, which is the company that kind of is behind the Collegiate Exposure Camps, is a partner of ours at Parenting Aces. So just disclaimer for that, but there's no financial arrangement. We just support each other's work. And Ryan works with Tarek Merchant of I'm Recruitable and, puts these camps on every summer. And COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench in things, but it seems like things are getting back on track with in-person recruiting and camps and all of that. And so we thought it would be really helpful to all of you out there who have kids who want to play college tennis to kind of discuss the differences between exposure camps, showcases, going to camps on college campuses, and just being at tournaments and having college coaches watch you there, because there seems to be a lot of confusion around that. And Ryan, you get questions every day, even though we did Facebook Live a few weeks ago, hoping to help people understand it, but we thought we should dig a little deeper into it today.
Yeah, that sounds great. And just to be clear, like Tarek, he started I'm Recruitable and Collegiate Exposure Camps, and they're definitely like two separate entities. But he did start both of them, and I appreciate the work he did, and I'm glad to kind of get to run things a little bit now on the camp side of things. But yeah, I'm glad to discuss all those topics today.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for those of you watching the video version of this, I apologize for the video quality today. I've been relegated to the Outer Banks at my house to record. So please excuse that, but hopefully the audio portion is clear as usual. So Ryan, let's start by giving some definitions, if you can, the differences between what is an exposure camp versus a showcase.
Yeah, so our exposure camps relative to a showcase are going to be a little bit different in terms of how you interact with coaches. So at our camps, we typically have a 3-day camp, and the first day and a half of the camp, based on our typical schedule, you're going to spend on the court with coaches doing drills. They're going to be giving you a lot of feedback in terms of things that you can do better or better ways to prepare for college tennis. So it's really a lot about development.
And let me interrupt. When you say coaches, you mean actual college coaches, active ones?
Correct. Yeah. All our coaches are active college coaches, and not just active college coaches, but from great schools. I mean, this summer we have, coaches from UPenn and Harvard and Amherst and multiple NESCAC schools, Swarthmore. I mean, a lot of really great schools and a lot of really great academic schools, in addition to tennis. So yeah, those are the coaches that players would be working with directly on the court in terms of doing drills and, getting advice directly from those coaches. And so our camps, we always have one coach for every 4 to 5 players, so at a typical camp, we might have 80 players and around 20 coaches would be what we're looking at. And, the coaches, their objective for the camp is to help you become a better player, and also kind of just prepare for college tennis. And that's a little bit different than a showcase. Obviously, the coach might see a player they're interested in terms of coming to their school, which is also a part of it. But a showcase is more about, playing a set or playing a match and having coaches see you play almost solely for the purpose of recruitment. So that's a little bit different than what we do. And a showcase typically would have, quite a few more coaches than what we have at an event. So you potentially are going to be in front of more coaches, but it's less about development and more about coaches just watching players who they're interested in. And I don't want to speak ill of showcases. There are a lot of positives to going to a showcase. It's just much different in terms of the potential interaction that you have.
And just to point out, a lot of the showcases, at least the good ones, also provide educational opportunities, not just for the players, but for the parents too, to help them understand the recruiting process better. And, I know y'all include that as well, but it is different because from the showcases point of view, they're there mostly to provide an opportunity for players to be seen by college coaches. And for the camps, your goal is really focused on the education and the development more than exposing potential recruits to coaches that might be interested in them. That is certainly a piece of it, but that's not the main focus of what you guys are doing. Am I saying that correctly?
That's right. And I mean, we have players every year who attend camp and end up going to a school, of one of the coaches who was at camp. But that's not like our primary objective. That just kind of happens to go along with the camp in terms of the coaches working with players. So I guess that's an added bonus. But it's really nice for the players to get a lot of good information. I guess using an old phrase, directly from the horse's mouth. I mean, that's
Right.
what they're with our camps. And also when we have, talks and different things, we're not talking about, hey, one talk about college tennis for 30 minutes. I mean, we spend a couple hours a day covering different topics off the court that are relevant for players interested in playing in college.
Is there an age range that's appropriate for exposure camps versus showcases?
I get that question a lot, or just in general, like, oh, am I too young, or is it too late, or things like that. And, in my estimation, obviously there's a financial component involved as well. So that can play a role, but it's hard to get started too early. I mean, if you go to a showcase and you're in the 8th or 9th grade, are you going to get as much interest as if you're in the 10th or 11th grade? Probably not. But at the same time, it kind of sets you down the path of understanding what you need to do, how you need to make connections, and kind of preparing you for that process. And for our camps, we have a lot of kids who are freshmen and sophomores. Eighth graders are welcome also. But a lot of times people will wait until they're a junior or senior. And I don't feel like it's too late, but if you're a sophomore and you're getting started on things, I think that's great. And it's only going to help you maybe narrow down what schools you might be interested in a little sooner. And I think that's always a good thing for, helping you find a school that's the best fit for you.
What about a range developmentally? For example, is there a UTR range that is appropriate for an exposure camp or a showcase, or a USTA ranking or an ITF ranking?
That reminds me, many years ago, actually one of our first camps in Canada, one of the players there, Greg, shout out to Greg. Greg ended up playing on my team. And he told me after we played a match his freshman year, he goes, coach, he goes, when they had the camp in Canada, he said, one of the coaches said that anybody here can play college tennis. And he goes, I looked at a few of the players, and he goes, I wasn't too sure about that. And he goes, now that we played this team we just played, he goes, that's 100% right. He goes, anybody here can play college tennis. So there are huge differences in levels depending on, where you go to school. And so, at our camps, we have players who are 4 or 5 UTR, and we have players who are 12 UTR. Are those players going to be doing drills together on the court? Definitely not. But the idea that, you need this certain UTR in order to be a college tennis player, at a certain level, yes. I mean, absolutely, that's a factor. But there are a lot of opportunities out there at different colleges and universities. I mean, more or less for everyone, and I think that's important to recognize. The tricky part a little bit is sometimes that it can be tricky to find a match in terms of your level and your academic desires. So a lot of the schools who participate in our camps are very prestigious academically, and almost without fail, those types of schools have very strong tennis teams. And so on occasion, maybe there's a player who is a fit in terms of tennis, but academically it's a little bit of a challenge. Or maybe there's a player who's a fit in terms of academics, but tennis wise, it's a little bit of a challenge. So definitely, you want to explore all your options, and there are a lot of options and a lot of places that can be a good fit for almost everyone. And I think that's important to recognize. In relation to a showcase a little bit, that's one thing that I like a little bit better about our camps is that if you go to a showcase, sorry, my camera's moving. If you go to a showcase and you're a little bit lower UTR, you may come away with minimal interest or minimal interaction with coaches and feeling a little bit discouraged. And sometimes, there's no reason to be discouraged. It just maybe wasn't a match for you at the event, or maybe there are coaches there and you talk to 3 or 4 coaches. But I guess I would say whether you attend an exposure camp or a showcase, if it doesn't go perfectly as planned, stay the course in terms of finding your school.
And I also want to take this opportunity to remind everybody about the Universal Tennis College Fit Tool, because as Ryan's saying, there is a place in college tennis for pretty much everyone who wants to play. It's just a matter of finding the right school and finding the balance of academics and tennis level that work for you. And excuse me, the Universal Tennis website, if you go to universaltennis.com and type in the search bar College Fit Tool, you can put your UTR in and it'll pull up a list of schools where you would fit within their top 6 players. And so that's a really helpful way to kind of start the process of which schools might be a good fit for me tennis wise. And then you can start to do your research on the academics and the size of the town and the other pieces of choosing the right college for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's definitely a good starting point. And a lot of players, including myself, if UTR would have existed at the time, you always want to kind of stretch to that next level. Okay. And that's good that you feel that way. But the first thing I would say is that UTR is important, but it's by no means the end of the world on who coaches are looking for in terms of the recruiting process. But with that said, if I have, 6 players on my team and the UTRs range from 9.5 to 11, and you're a 9.4, that doesn't mean that I have no interest in you or another coach has no interest in you. But realistically, the coach is probably looking for another 10 or a 10.5 or 11. They're probably not looking for a 9.4. And maybe you have some traits in terms of your attitude and work ethic, and you've only been playing for 3 years, that the coach says, oh yeah, this is going to be a great player for us potentially, even if they're a little bit lower. But you kind of have to look at it from both sides when you're considering, what schools might be a fit.
Well, and I say this all the time. Coaches are always looking to recruit new number 1s. They're not looking to recruit new number 6s.
Exactly. Because sometimes people will say, well, you lost your number 5 and 6. You need a new 5 and 6. And I'm like, no, I need a new 2. And I want the other people to be 5 and 6. So no, yeah. You're correct. And I will say, though, there are exceptions. I mean, my men's team, I rarely even look at UTR for my own team, but our highest player is something like 11.3. And then our number 6 player is probably, I don't know, 9.5 to 10. But the player that I have playing number 6 right now, I haven't looked at his UTR, but just based on, we just got back from Hilton Head, some players that he beat. He was a flat 8 when he started in the fall, and he's a freshman. I mean, he was 8.0, and now he's probably 9.5 at least, maybe close to 10. I haven't looked. But the point is, you can't sell yourself short because of UTR. He's a guy that I didn't anticipate being in the top 6. He worked really hard. He practiced outside of practice. He needs to lift weights a little more if he's watching, but he's doing great. And I mean, anybody outside observer, if they looked at the guys we had and they're like, oh, this guy's a freshman and he's an 8.0, you would think like he has no chance. Well, here he is, number 6, and he just won a clinching match for us in the last match we played. So, you can't strictly go by UTR, obviously.
Sure. And I say this all the time too. College coaches are smart. They know that there are factors outside of somebody's rating or ranking that will affect how well that player does in their team environment. So, but we got to start somewhere. So that College Fit Tool, like I said, is a great jumping off point just to form your big list. And I always advise this. Your big list is like 100 schools. You've got some reach schools, you've got some, yeah, I'm pretty sure I could get in, but maybe not. And then you've got your sure fits. And I think it's really important through the recruiting process to make sure that you're reaching out to a variety of schools and a variety of coaches, because you never know who's looking for a new player and where your particular playing style and your particular personality and your particular academic credentials will fit in.
Absolutely.
So let's get back to the camps. Can you talk us through a typical day at Collegiate Exposure Camp?
Yeah. So when we start off on Friday, we have 2 camps at UPenn this summer that are Friday to Sunday. And when we start off on Friday, we kind of do some drills that we're trying to see if anyone's out of place in terms of who they're hitting with. And so we use UTR to kind of separate people in the beginning. But last year, I remember there was a girl from California. I think her UTR was a 5. And if you ask me what it was, I'd say it was a 7.5. And we quickly saw that she was not in the correct group. Okay. So we do some things for the first, hour and a half to kind of make sure that we've got people in a reasonably good place. And then from there, we move on to, doing more drills that coaches use in practice. We try to make it emulate the college environment as much as possible in terms of drills that coaches actually use in their practice. So I'm the director of the camp, but ultimately it's the other college coaches who determine what we're doing in terms of drills. And so we run through some of those drills. We get started in the morning. We'll have lunch. We have a hour and a half or so of talks. And when I hear sometimes oh gosh, an hour and a half of talks, that sounds painful, and I've heard a lot of the speeches multiple times or just different topics covered by coaches. And to anybody interested in tennis or college tennis, like, it's very much of interest. And so if players would hear that and they say, oh, I feel like I'm going to school, I think generally the feeling is that it's very, impactful and beneficial in terms of what the coaches have to say. I feel that way, and I've been a college coach for 19 years, so our feedback on that has been really good. In the afternoon, we get back on the court, doing some more drills and things. And then when we get into day two, our schedule changes a little bit in terms of drills and talks, and we get into a little bit more of college matches, college style matches. And so you'll be assigned to a team, and your team will have a few different coaches while you're there. A lot of times teams have two coaches. So you're going to interact with different coaches that are your direct coach, as well as your the coaches of your opposing team. And basically the coaches just treat it like they would a college match. So you warm up as a team. They talk to you before the match. These are the things we want to try to do in doubles. We talk after the doubles. This is what we need to work on. Now we're moving into singles. We want to focus on this. And it's very much a team environment, as far as encouraging your teammates as well, which is a big part of college tennis. And so, overall in the 3-day event, I think it's a great, introduction to kind of what college tennis is really like. We had an event at the national campus in December, and a coach who's been a coach for many years, Jerome, I won't say how many years you've been coaching, I'm not sure. He came up to me afterwards and he goes, "Hey, this is just like college tennis," and for me, like, that's the best thing I can hear. And so that's kind of what we're trying to emulate. And then obviously if the players, make a few connections along the way, that's of great benefit as well. But I think one of the things that's really great is we're fortunate to have the camps at great locations like we had at the national campus. We're having at UPenn this summer, and having it those places, for me, having been a million tennis related places, is exciting and motivating. And I think that's especially true for the players. So, do they benefit from what actually happens at camp? Absolutely. But I think one of the biggest things is they walk away excited about tennis and excited about college tennis, which, is worth a whole lot.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to point out is you talk about how the coaches are running drills similar to what they do with their college teams. What I was shocked at, and I think my son was surprised at when he started going through the recruiting process, was the drills aren't any different. It's the same stuff you've been doing. What's different is the intensity, right? And the hype during drills, like the guys or the girls really pushing each other to do well, cheering each other on during drills, which you don't get in junior tennis when you're just going to the court for your daily drill group. It's a different environment, a different atmosphere.
No, for sure. And I mean, our coaches that we have worked at camps, like, I start to put something together before about like things they've done, whether that's won national titles or Big Ten titles or National Coach of the Year or things like that. I mean, that's just off the top of my head, thinking of 3 or 4 people. And so those coaches know how to motivate people and get people moving, and especially from the aspect of a team, which is a little bit different than what you're used to in the junior setting. So no, absolutely. I agree 100%.
What advice, Ryan, do you have to the kids attending camps and showcases in terms of making sure they're putting their best self forward?
The first thing is, like, I always think it's good to, reach out to coaches of schools you're potentially interested in before camp. And so, you send them an email and say, "Hey, I see you're going to be at camp, or I see you're going to be at this showcase. I'm glad to be a part of the event. And I just wanted to let you know that I have an interest in your school. And, I hope to meet you there. And then when the player goes there, just walk up to the coach and say, hey, I sent you an email, I'm interested in your school, or I would like to learn more about it. And I just wanted to introduce myself. So I think that's a good step number one. The second thing is that.
Let me stop you there 1 second, because that's huge, right? That is a player taking initiative, reaching out to these coaches and marketing themselves to the coaches to let them know, hey, I'm interested in you. We're both going to be at this event. Let's connect there and get to know each other a little bit. And I think that's really important for players to do. The other thing I want to add is that at the events, the coaches will be wearing their school gear. So you'll know, even if you have never met this coach before or never been to one of their matches and seen them, you'll know who they are based on what they're wearing. So at least make sure you familiarize yourself with school logos and school colors so that you don't go up to, let's say, the Florida coach and think it's the Georgia coach,
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I've heard of that happening, but I guess it is entirely possible. That would, realistically, there are going to be times when a player may be interested in the school and the coach has very limited interest, and for whatever reason. But I don't know many coaches that are going to fault the player for, saying I'm interested in your school and coming up and introducing themselves. I mean, they're going to see that as a positive, even if it might not potentially be a fit for whatever reason.
What information do the coaches get at the camps in terms of the players? Obviously they get a list of names, but are they getting details about the players as well?
So for a showcase, you would get more details. Our camp isn't as focused on that part of things. And so a little bit less information potentially. We use UTRs to kind of divide players up, and when we have our camps, like the coaches are aware of the players' UTRs, but that's not something that we share with the players at all, because we don't really have to be the emphasis. So the coaches would have that information just in terms of making sure the groups are correct and things like that. And then obviously, that may play a role in if they have an interest in a player and that type of stuff. And then of course, if players reach out, they're more than welcome to share more information in terms of their academics and that type of stuff. And like I said, our focus of our camps is really on development, but it's impossible not to have the other part kind of come in a little bit, and like I said, we've had a lot of players who end up going to schools from, coaches from our camps, and showcases. Again, that's probably more the emphasis. But I don't know. I'm somewhat biased, obviously, in terms of this, to some degree, but like showcases, it's more focused on that. But depending on the player, they may come to our event and have far more interaction in that sense than they would at a showcase. For other, they're going to go to a showcase and have far more recruiting interest than they would potentially at one of our camps, just because there's more coaches there. So that's going to vary a little bit depending on the player.
Well, the reason I asked that question, Ryan, is because I just kind of want to make sure that the listeners understand when you reach out to coaches, it's important that you include things like your rating and ranking, of course, but also your graduation year, your GPA, any test scores, SAT, ACT, PSAT if you're younger, so that the coaches know a little bit more about you and can determine if your graduation year is going to have a spot for you. And I think that's, something that a lot of players forget to do, is include that other information. They all know to include their name and their age and their rating, but sometimes they forget to include the academic side and the year that they're actually going to be coming onto campus as a freshman.
Yeah, and our coaches do have access to their graduation years as well. But absolutely, that's important. And at our events and I would say, showcases and other camps as well, a majority of the players are very strong academically, and being strong academically is, obviously gives you a lot more options than if you're not strong academically. But at the same time, there are a lot of schools that there's a lot of competition in terms of getting into the school. Sorry, I'm having camera problems here. there's a lot of competition in terms of getting into school. So, I mean, you can be very strong academically and maybe just not quite make the cut, in terms of things. And so all that is very important, to share with coaches. And, a lot of players will have a profile online. There are definitely good places to do that. You mentioned I'm Recruitable at the beginning, as a place to do that, where it makes it easier to kind of share that important information.
For sure. So let's talk about when to do a showcase and when to do an exposure camp. Let's say you've got a kid who is a rising ninth grader. At what point is it beneficial for them to be at a camp versus being at a showcase, or vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to answer either or. I think both, have their benefits. I do know that, having been involved in some showcases in the past, you're going to have more people walk away from the showcase who maybe didn't get the level of interest they wanted, or didn't get to talk to as many coaches as they wanted, which with our camps pretty much never happens. I mean, since I've been the director, I've really had zero complaints about that. So there is a little bit of a risk with a showcase in terms of not having that interaction that you want to have with coaches, or you garner interest, but it's not really from the schools who you are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
So on the positive side for showcases, there are a lot of coaches there. And I think one thing, since COVID came along, and it shouldn't really be an issue too much moving forward, but I think you want to know, if you're going to a showcase too, how many coaches are actually going to be at the showcase, not just virtually. I think that, boots on the ground actually at the event are important. And I think that should be getting back to normal at this point. Yeah. But I mean, showcase is a great opportunity to be in front of a whole lot of coaches and show them what you can do. And we all know, when we talk to players and we talk to parents, it's very common to hear, "Oh, my UTR is really higher than what it is." So here you go. Show us. Okay. So I think that's, one benefit of a showcase, potentially as well. And it may be something that you were planning on asking about, but in relation to UTR ratings and having matches recorded and that type of stuff, that is one difference too between our events and a showcase. A showcase, you're playing a set or a match, and potentially that could be recorded for UTR. It depends on the showcase a little bit. I think some do and some don't. Our events, we previously did record results for UTR, and we no longer do. And once in a while, when I talk to parents, they will be a little bit concerned about that, and they'll say, "Well, we really need to get some matches recorded for UTR," which I agree. I mean, if the more matches you can get in there and get an accurate rating, that's great. But for our events, it really works much better not to have the matches recorded, because we work much more, from a team aspect of things. And then our coaches are asking players to make changes to their game while they're at camp. So, maybe you need to do a better job of moving in on short balls or whatever it might be. And I feel like it's asking a lot of the player to be trying these new things when the matches count for UTR. And so for us, it's really been a big benefit for our camps not to include those matches in UTR. And then, if I'm being honest, you kind of get some fandom injuries and different things like that. So it's been really great for us to avoid that a little bit, and then also be able to have players accept coaching without the concern of, hey, this might negatively affect my UTR. So it's been good for us to do it that way.
Well, it's interesting because I remember when y'all's matches did count toward UTR. Was there a particular something that happened that caused you to make that change?
I wouldn't say particular something. I mean, we just had a few issues with, injuries and different things.
I mean, backdraw flu, right? We see it all the time at junior tournaments where, gosh, if I lose to this guy, my UTR is going to drop. So I think I'm sick.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, though, the coaching aspect of it and trying new things. And I mean, there's so much
perfect sense to me.
Like so
what you're saying
among players and parents, that like players feel pressure, and that's okay. They're going to feel pressure in the college environment as well. But sometimes in a little bit more of a learning environment, it's helpful to have them feel, more relaxed. And I think that's definitely the case, with us not recording the matches.
Yeah, certainly. And, we talk a lot about finding balance, right? And when you are learning something new, you don't want to test it out in a situation that counts for something. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So, Brian, what else do we need to know? I feel like I'm missing questions here, and maybe it's just because it's early in the morning for me and my coffee hasn't fully kicked in.
Yeah, so I made a few notes, so I'm going to peek at this to
Oh,
see.
good.
And so one thing is like our camps at UPenn are $1,200 for 3 days, and we have a lot of people that sign up. We more or less sell out every year for both those camps, and once in a while I get somebody that said, "Oh my gosh, the cost." And so our camps are a little bit more expensive than other camps, and part of that is because of the coaching staff that we have. I mean, we have I mentioned earlier, but I made a list here: Penn, Harvard, Amherst. We have several NESCAC schools: Swarthmore, Haverford, Fordham, Binghamton. You can see who's coming to each camp on the website. But I mean, we pay our coaches to work the camp. So I mean, potentially they're looking for players, but they're working this as kind of a job too, and looking to help everybody. Even if they're not a potential recruit for their school. So that adds to the cost a little bit. We have it at great places like UPenn. And the way that I think about it, and I think is the way that you should think about it, is that a lot of these players are going to go to very high academic schools, many of which are costly, and you're getting ready to spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on your education in 4 years. And if spending a little more money to come to our camp helps you make the right decision or find the right place, it's the extra cost is minimal,
Mhm.
so that's one thing that I try to explain to people in terms of the cost. I think it's also important to, any camp that you attend, we try to provide as much information as possible in terms of, what schools are going to be there. Our ratio of coaches, which are all college coaches, is 4 or 5 to 1 for players. And I think it's important to know that, is there one coach for every 4 or 5 players? Is there one coach for every 10 players? Are all those coaches college coaches, or are just a few college coaches and the rest other people? So I think those are important things to know. And I think the other things I have listed here, we've kind of covered in terms of, education, trying to provide the college environment, and a little bit about, recording or not recording UTR matches. But there are a lot of options out there for camp, and there are camp or showcases, and different events may be a better fit for different players. But I think we've got a lot of positives, and especially for those kids who are very high academic, looking for those types of schools. I mean, I think our event is hard to beat in that sense.
Let's talk nuts and bolts for 1 second. If a kid is traveling to UPenn to come to a collegiate exposure camp, somebody's picking them up at the airport, they've got
So
lodging, meals, all that.
prior to COVID, our events, we offered like a commuter option and a residential option. And unfortunately, at this point, we're still just able to offer the commuter option for this summer. And so they would be responsible for hotels, and we provide lunch, but the other meals as well. And when we first had to do that, I was a little bit concerned about how it might affect attendance and those types of things. But a lot of people just kind of make a little vacation of it, and it's really hasn't been a big issue, since we've been limited in being able to provide accommodations and things.
So that means that typically a parent or parents are traveling with the players because they've got to stay in a hotel and they've got to be able to get back and forth, and kids can't rent a car and yada yada. So is there something for the parents as part of the camp, or is this a player focused event only?
Yeah, so we do have a little bit of a seminar for the parents to kind of talk about tennis things that I'm fired about tennis things that we think they need to know. And so that is a part of the camp as well. I would say it's more focused on the players. We last year had some limitations in terms of parents not being able to stick around because of the COVID protocols of UPenn. I don't anticipate that to be the case this year. I expect parents are going to be able to stick around and watch if they'd like, or listen to the talks and things like that. That's a little bit out of our control. It's kind of whatever UPenn's policies are, but based on what I know at this point, barring some changes, I expect parents to be able to stick around. So on one hand, it's player focused. On the other hand, we do provide that for parents in terms of, some good information that we think is relevant. And then also, they're welcome to kind of stick around and listen to some of the talks from the coaches and watch the drills and that type of stuff. So potentially it's a lot of good information for them as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you want the parents to stick around, or is your preference for the parents to drop the kid off and go enjoy the town?
Yeah, that's a funny question. Really,
well, listen, our audience is mostly tennis parents, so let's be straight up with them about, what their role is here.
I have zero issue with parents sticking around if you're on the fence on every court your son or daughter is on, or you're 10 feet from them all the time. That's probably not very beneficial. But I would say, feel welcome to stick around, but probably at a distance a little bit, where the player kind of feels relaxed. And I mean, we do different things as well, like in terms of making it like a college environment. Like when we divide up into teams, they all have to like create cheers that they do before the match, and a lot of things that are fun and some a little silly. And sometimes the players, I feel like, will relax and come out of their shell a little bit more if mom and dad aren't there. But I mean, I have zero issues with parents being there as long as they're not, like I said, on the fence.
What about parent interaction with the college coaches at your events?
Yeah, so basically when we have check-in or when they pick players up at the end of the day, we'll definitely have parents who will talk to the college coaches. And I mean, that's no issue. And I think the coaches, are glad to talk to the parents, in most instances. And so there is some interaction. It's not necessarily, designed that, hey, this is the hour where you talk to college coaches, but there is that opportunity for sure if that's something parents are interested in.
So for a parent that is considering traveling with their child to one of your camps this summer, pros and cons of hanging out all day versus dropping the kid off and letting them do their thing.
I guess if you force me to say what should you do, I would say that probably stay part of the day. Like I think staying all day is probably a little much. It's not going to hurt anything if you do. But being gone all day, I mean, you can kind of look at our schedule when you check in, or it's on our website, what our schedule is, and see like what you think might be beneficial. If we're having talks from 12:30 to 2 or whatever it is, maybe that would be a good time. And so I would say, look at the schedule and see what might be beneficial in terms of a parent. But yeah, I mean, probably not all day, probably not gone the whole day. And if you are gone the whole day, it's zero issue whatsoever,
And I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there from my own personal experience and conversations that I've had with college coaches. And that is, the coaches want to get to know the players. At this stage of the game, getting to know the parents isn't really that important. It's more important that they get to know the kid and kind of get a sense of, does that player fit in with their team culture? Does that player have the drive and desire to do what the coach needs them to do once they get on campus? As you get later in the recruiting process, that's where the parent, needs to kind of step in and ask the tough questions of the coaches and make sure that they understand the details of any offers that are coming or anything like that. But early on in the process, honestly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but what I hear is the coaches really want to get to know the players.
No, 100%. I mean, that's totally accurate. I mean, coaches definitely don't mind talking to parents, but if it's 20 rapid fire questions, you know what I mean? That's probably not a positive for your son or daughter, if that's your conversation with the coach. I mean, if I'm being realistic.
Right. And I want to encourage the parents out there, if you do have questions about college recruiting and how it works, please schedule a consult with me. I do this every day and would love to talk to you. I have no skin in the game. And it's important that parents understand the role of the coach during recruiting, the role of the player during recruiting, and the role of the parent during recruiting. So please do reach out and schedule that.
Well, and the one thing that I would add to that, I mean, definitely it helps to have someone, experienced like yourself who can provide a lot of good information and unbiased information. That's great. The one thing I would add is that the one thing that coaches, we all have a big smile or eye roll, I'm not sure which, but is when I talk to parents all the time about camps, and they have questions about camps or about the coaches coming or whatever it is. And I'm always glad to do that. And I think a lot of times after our calls, the parents feel better and they're like, oh, okay, this is it. But I always want to provide them with, the most accurate information possible. And one thing that I hear sometimes that I cringe a little is that, well, her UTR is this, but she was injured and this happened and that happened and these things happened. And like the last thing any coach wants to hear is like excuses, and that whether that's from a player or from a parent, I think that's universal, but something that happens pretty commonly. And I would be the first one to say that, we're kind of getting out of it now. It seems like hopefully the COVID time, there are definitely players whose UTRs are not accurate, and coaches understand that. And I think players and parents understand that. But generally speaking, coaches don't want to hear a story about a bum ankle and you fought through and then this happened and that happened. And I mean, just a general statement that I'm certain is true.
Interesting. Because I mean, that's funny that you say that, because I always tell people, if you have been out injured for an extended period of time, make sure that you let coaches know that, there's a gap in my schedule because of this. Not an excuse, but more of an explanation.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference in those things. You know what I mean? Like that, I mentioned the girl we had from California last year, and her UTR was totally off. It's okay to say, hey, I haven't been playing in UTR tournaments, I haven't been offered in my area, or I was injured and I haven't been able to play. It's kind of when you get into the details of excuses, that's where it's more of an issue, I think. The other, no problem.
Yeah, gotcha. What else do we need to know, Ryan? Tell us how people get more information on the camps, how they sign up, and the dates of the camps this summer.
Yeah, so our website is collegiateexposurecamps.com. A lot of times the parents and players will ask me, well, what coaches are coming? And we try to keep that list really updated online. So I just added Amherst for our June camp, actually Harvard too, but Harvard's already on the website. I've got to add Amherst here right now for our June camp. And so you can get that information there about players. It shows our schedule, kind of what we do every day. But yeah, it's collegiateexposurecamps.com. And then our email is tennis@collegiatecamps.com. And that comes directly to me. And I'm more than happy to, have a phone call with parents if they have more questions or things like that. Our events at UPenn are June 24th through the 26th and July 22nd through the 24th. So looking forward to those. Definitely. We've already got a lot of signups. Our price is a little bit lower if you sign up before April 1st, which you can see on the website as well.
Awesome. And is there a cap on the number of players that you accept?
I won't say it's a hard cap, but there's a cap. So we have 20 courts at UPenn, and usually we'll have, at a maximum around 80. I think our first camp last year, we kind of pushed it to 85 and did a little juggling to make that work. Generally something in that range. Like I said, we might adjust a little the schedule to kind of get a few more in, but right in that area as far as the number of players.
Perfect. We will have a link to Collegiate Exposure Camps in the show notes on ParentingAces.com, as well as Ryan's email address that he just mentioned. So you'll be able to just click on that and get the information you need. Don't forget, if you are interested, sign up now, because the price goes up after April 1st. And we want everybody to be able to save money if possible. That's always a good thing in junior tennis.
Definitely. And again, I'm more than happy to talk with parents. I feel like a lot of times a 5 or 10 minute conversation goes a long way. So definitely reach out if you have more questions.
I love that. Well, Ryan, it's nice to see you. Thanks for coming and doing this. I know you get a lot of questions about the differences between camps and showcases. I get a lot of questions about the differences in camps and showcases. And so I'm happy that we had the opportunity to shed a little light on that for the Parenting Aces community. And for all of you watching or listening, thank you for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces.
Thanks.